Abrimos las ponencias de hoy con Chris Bourg, directora de bibliotecas del MIT, el Massachusetts Institute of Technology, que antes de eso ha trabajado en otras bibliotecas como la de la Universidad de Stanford o la Academia Militar de West Point. Ella es miembro de diversos órganos y comités, como el Comité de Dirección de SOC Archive, una plataforma de acceso abierto para la investigación en ciencias sociales, y dentro del propio MIT copreside un grupo de trabajo sobre acceso abierto. Y ha escrito diversos artículos en varios medios sobre el futuro de las bibliotecas, área en la que es una experta reconocida y atesora un extenso conocimiento. Entonces, sin más, empezamos con la presentación de Chris Bourg.
Thank you so much. Yo hablo un poquito de español solamente. Lo siento, I'm going to speak in English. I know only a little Spanish. So thank you all so much for being here this morning. Thank you to everyone who invited me and helped organize this conference. I really am very excited to be here to help you all celebrate the 20th anniversary of the consortium. I'm just so pleased to be here, so pleased to have been invited. And by the way, this room is beautiful, and the view from here is even better. You all look beautiful, and it's a little bit of an imposing space to be in. I hope that I can do it justice with some of the words that I'll speak today. It really is just a privilege to be here, to speak with you, share with you some of my thoughts on the future of libraries, to share with you some of what we're doing at MIT in the libraries, in thinking about the future and thinking about the future of libraries and how that intersects with the future of open science. So I'll speak to that a little bit. We've been thinking quite a bit at MIT about how to reimagine what a research library, what a university library could be and should be in what I call a computational age. Also, maybe think of it as the age of artificial intelligence, the age of machine learning. So that's what I'll talk about. Again, I'm especially happy to be able to give this talk here on this occasion, the 20th anniversary of the consortium, because it's clear to me what I've learned about the consortium so far. You all are committed to the same kind of sharing and collaboration across libraries and across universities that I personally think is absolutely going to be even more important as we move into more of a computational future, more of a future that is driven by machine learning and algorithms. I think actually libraries become even more important, and library systems and cooperation across libraries and sharing becomes even more important because everything starts to be done at a scale that really none of us can do alone. And so it's especially good to be here talking to a consortium and to a consortium that clearly has done such marvelous work in collaborating for the good of your communities for 20 years now. So again, thank you everyone who has helped to get me here, who thought to invite me here, and who has made the trip here and all of the arrangements really quite easy and pleasant. So I'm very happy to be here. So let me talk a little bit. I do think that the best way for libraries to meet the challenges of the future so that we can support our universities in educating students and producing the kinds of research that allow us as sort of a global community to face the future and solve, you know, some of the big problems that are facing the world, the big global problems, climate change and refugee crisis and poverty and increasing inequality and so many of the health crises. There's so many problems that require research and attention, and I think libraries play such an important role in our in supporting the research and that will help solve those problems and find solutions. and in educating the students who will implement the solutions to some of the problems that we are facing. So I think the best way to do that is, of course, for us to work together. And to share our own experiences and our own thinking with each other. So it really is a pleasure for me to come and share some of my thinking, and then also for me to learn from all of you. So I will start and share a little bit of my experience at MIT, tell you a little bit about the context there, and then talk about my thoughts about the future. So just to give you some sense about MIT, it's probably best known as one of the world's leading technology and engineering schools. It is ironically ranked in some rankings, if you believe in ranking, which I'm not crazy about, but we do it anyway. It is usually considered the top university in the world, but then only the #3 university in the US. So I don't know how that works exactly, but we are right next door to Harvard, so I think that we are literally less than 5 miles away from Harvard. So we are in their shadow in the US, but globally we have perhaps a different reputation. So that's always interesting to me. So we have about a little over 1,000 faculty at MIT, and we have over 12,000 students. But one thing that's important is that we have about 7,000 of those are graduate students and 5,000 undergraduates. So we have more graduate students than undergraduate students, which makes it a very research-intensive university. And although we are, of course, best known for engineering and sciences, MIT does have students and faculty across 5 different schools. So we have architecture and planning is also quite prominent at MIT. We do have, the biggest school is engineering. That is the most popular major is electrical engineering and computer science. A thriving, though, humanities, arts, and social science school, School of Science, and a School of Management. So we're not just a one-note school, although that is probably what we are most famous for. But I think that it's as important to know sort of a little bit about how big we are and the size of MIT as it is to know sort of culturally what MIT is like. And there are 3 things that I think are quite important to understand the culture of MIT. The first is it's a real focus on a hands-on approach to learning. So the motto for MIT is mens et manos, so mind and hand. And it really does, that motto really is more than just words at MIT. The teaching is very focused on learning by doing, and so the students get very involved in research projects right from the beginning. And 90% of the undergraduates at MIT work on a research project with a faculty member before they graduate. So it's a very high percentage, and it really is about not just learning from lecture, but also by doing things and getting involved in actually doing research. So that is one of the cultural features of MIT that is important. The other is MIT has a long history of a commitment to openness. So it's a very important value at MIT. It's enacted in many ways. I'll share just a couple. We're a private university, and in the US, most private universities are physically quite restricted in terms of their access, and especially the libraries. But MIT is an urban campus right in the middle of Cambridge, right across the river from Boston, and our campus is open to visitors, and the libraries are open to visitors, which is very unusual for a private university in the US, but that's part of the sort of cultural commitment at MIT is to be open. We also, MIT created something called OpenCourseware in 2000. Some of you may be familiar with that, and that was sort of, it's described at MIT as this simple but bold idea that MIT should publish all of our course materials online so that anyone could benefit from essentially an MIT-style education. We made them widely available, and at this point, over 2 million people visit those materials every month, and there are 2,400 courses, MIT courses available to the world for free. So very much about openness and sharing. And then in 2009, MIT passed one of the first all-campus open access policies. It was by a unanimous vote of the faculty. And with this policy, they turned to the libraries, of course, to implement the policy. And so at this point, the policy covers faculty journal articles. And to this point, we have now shared and are sharing 45% of the journal articles written by MIT faculty since that policy passed are now available through the library's repository openly to the world, which is a remarkable percentage. In fact, it's about twice what any other leading US university is able to share. So we're quite proud of that. And then finally, MIT is a place culturally that is sort of obsessed with innovation. Always wanting to invent the next new thing. Some of the things that have been either invented or discovered at MIT, Tim Berners-Lee says he invented the internet, invented big parts of the internet. That's one of our big outputs to the world. A year after I got to MIT in 2016, MIT scientists were partially responsible for detecting gravitational waves. So these are ripples in the time-space continuum. That was an interesting time to be at MIT. I felt like I was living in the future. It was quite remarkable. And then lest you think that MIT is only about science and technology, one of our music faculty also is credited with inventing Guitar Hero. So the video game Guitar Hero, if you're familiar with that. So always innovative, always thinking about the next big thing. And our most recent innovation at MIT was, in fact, to reinvent ourselves. And so earlier this year, we launched a $6 billion commitment to a new college of computing. Again, a huge investment of time and money. It's a huge effort. We'll eventually add 25 faculty to MIT. And the goal of this College of Computing is to address the global opportunities and challenges presented by the prevalence of computing and artificial intelligence by infusing computational thinking across every discipline at MIT. And also there's a commitment to ensure that computer science and machine learning and artificial intelligence is informed by work in other disciplines. So it's a college, so it's meant to be across the curriculum and to have two-way conversations with every other discipline. And in particular, they're very interested in ensuring that computing work and artificial intelligence and machine learning work is informed by the social sciences and the humanities. And so that's a big commitment, a big change right now. It's sort of all that MIT is talking about is our new College of Computing and how that's going to work and change the face of the campus and of the culture. So I give you all of this background about MIT because I came there in 2015 as the new director of libraries, and it quickly became clear to me that this was a place that was a very good setting, maybe even a perfect setting, to develop a bold and ambitious vision for libraries, because it really is the hands-on part, the commitment to openness and the commitment to innovation made it sort of a nice mix of places to be a librarian and to be someone who was asked to not just maintain the library as it is, but actually think about libraries of the future and to try to be an example for other libraries and lead where we might have some strengths. So it was clear when I got there that this was a place that was way past thinking about libraries as just books and buildings. So quickly a little bit, though, about the MIT libraries. We, of course, do have books and buildings. And we have 5 libraries across campus. We have about 160 staff. Our print collection is about 2.3 million items. Again, the open access collection is perhaps what I'm most proud of. We have over 30,000 articles in that open access collection. They are downloaded globally at about 2.3 million times a year. We still have print circulation and physical traffic The traffic to the library spaces, we get about 500,000 visitors a year to the library spaces. That's actually going up just a little bit every year for the last few years, the physical visits, but the circulation of print materials is declining rapidly while the use of our electronic materials is skyrocketing. And I guess that this seems like a fairly large library to some of you in terms of size, I don't know. But in the US, to be honest, compared to the universities that MIT thinks of as its peers, we're actually rather small. So again, we're right in the shadow of Harvard. We have 2.3 million volumes. Harvard has 10 times that. So they have a collection of 22 million. They have a staff of some 800. The other Ivy League schools, so Harvard and Princeton and Yale, their collections are all 10 million or more items, and they have staff of 300 to 500. So we consider ourselves as this sort of small upstart university, and I like to talk of us as small but mighty. And what I am sort of proud of is that we are mighty, we are strong in ways that I think are most relevant to the current challenges and the future research, and in fact ways that align very well with the culture of MIT that I talked about. So we're strong, the libraries are very strong in supporting open scholarship, and in the last few years we've been working very hard to transform our underlying technical infrastructure so that we could support computational uses of our collections, so that we can support people accessing our collections via computer code and algorithms and machine learning. And I'll talk about why I think that's really important, because we talk about the MIT libraries, my elevator pitch, my short version of who we are as a library is that we want to be open, interactive, and computational as a library. So to talk about how we arrived at that vision, at this idea that a library should be open, interactive, and computational, I have to go back to when I first got at MIT. When I first arrived, my boss, the provost, asked me to lead the campus in a conversation about what the future of libraries should be. So at US universities, those usually take the form of a task force. So I convened with the provost, we convened a task force at MIT on the future of libraries. So I volunteered to co-chair that task force. I'm not sure if that was a good idea or not, but the result was good. It was a lot of work. But we ended up with 30 members of our task force, about 20 faculty members from all across campus. So it was not just the humanists who made the most use of the physical libraries and the collections, but the co-chair of the task force was a faculty member from computer science and artificial intelligence. We had engineers, we had scientists, I had biologists, people from the management school, people from the MIT Media Lab. We also, of course, had staff from the libraries, from the Central Information Technology unit of the campus, and from the MIT Press on this task force. Again, this ranged from people who relied heavily on the library's physical collections to, of course, we had faculty who said, why am I on this task force? I haven't used the library in years. Of course, we know that they had used the library, just not the physical library or the physical collections, but the services and databases. But to them, they thought they hadn't used the library. So what we asked this group to do was to think about the future of libraries as a research question. So I told them when we kicked off the task force that I wasn't particularly interested in their opinions about how well the current library was serving their needs. We have other ways of finding that out. I didn't want to know sort of how we might improve a little bit here or there. Instead, I wanted to, thank you. Instead, I asked them to think critically about what a library can be and what a library should be in not just a digital age, but again, an age that I call the computational age, the age of artificial intelligence. And the report that this group created is available online. But the first conclusion was, in fact, that that although the first revolution in libraries is not quite complete, we're already ready for the second, more profound evolution of libraries. So the first revolution, of course, we're all aware of. It was the first digital revolution in libraries, where we went from print to digital. In that turn, right, we all know the library went from being a place where individuals would come to find physical things, books or maps or journal articles, so that they could read those things themselves. In that first turn, we went from that to really libraries being a service, right? A service where individuals would use this service of the libraries to gain online access to journal articles and other things so that they could read and use those things individually still and on their own devices. And although this was huge, this was a big shift, it's the one we've been talking about and undergoing for the last 20 years, I think many of us would admit that it unfortunately didn't open up access to scholarly content the way many of us hoped that it would, right? And in large part, frankly, because of the power and the monopoly of many of the large commercial publishers. The advent of online journals didn't actually democratize access to knowledge, and the potential, right, that we all felt when the internet really became ubiquitous. We all felt that there was this potential, I think, for online information and online scholarship to create information equality, right? But that's been stunted by the way it's been implemented. Nonetheless, this first revolution, right, it did make research and reading more efficient for those people who did have access. So it was a huge, and continues to be a huge change for libraries. But as we think about sort of the next evolution of libraries, right, the Future of Libraries Task Force emphasized not only the technological shift, but also combining this shift with a renewed commitment to open science and open scholarship to really realize the promises of technology. And the next shift, right? The next shift is not from just place to service and from physical to physical plus digital, but the next shift is an evolution of libraries from service to platform, and not just digital and physical, but also computational. And what I mean by that is the Library Task Force, the Future of Libraries Task Force, called on the libraries to operate as an open global platform. And the idea is that a platform is something that scholars and patrons can build on. It's a way of thinking about libraries as not just a warehouse or a repository of books and not just a service for content, but as a vehicle for interacting with that content and with tools and with expertise to not just consume information, but to create new knowledge. So it becomes much more active. And it's the idea that we now are creating new knowledge in many forms. It's not just text, it's images, it's data and maps, and it's multimedia, and it's interactive, and it's dynamic, and it often combines many of those elements. And for that sort of vision of a library as an open global platform to be truly effective for our current patrons, our current communities, and for the future, it has to be committed to openness and to serving a global community. This is what the Future of Libraries Task Force at MIT charged me with. No small feat. That's all. Just be an open global platform for everybody. But one of the sort of key features of the Library of the Future is that it should be a library accessible by machines and algorithms, not just by people. And so this is a quote from that task force, and the rest of the report is online at that URL. But this idea is that in a computational age, in the age of artificial intelligence and machine learning, as those technologies become so ubiquitous and become such a big part of our daily lives, but also very much a way of doing research across disciplines, as that becomes so much more prevalent, that we as librarians have to realize that humans are not our only patrons. And so we have to start thinking about how machines and algorithms are a new kind of patron for the libraries. Now, just to be clear, I don't think that machines will replace humans. I think that we'll always have a need for humans to read our books and read materials and make sense of them and use our own human intelligence and insights and creativity. But we also have to provide access to people who are going to use our collections computationally, who are going to write computer code, who are going to write algorithms to extract meaning from the collections that we provide and the services that we provide. And so there's some different needs, and it might require a different set of skills, and probably more importantly, a different way of thinking about how our resources might be used. So I think about artificial intelligence and machine learning in the context of libraries. What I'm talking about is computer programs and algorithms that would extract and derive meaning and patterns from data and from our collections as data, making predictions and inferences about and with data, and in doing so can see patterns and can start to solve problems and offer solutions at a scale that human alone can't do. So this is why, despite all of the concerns there might be about artificial intelligence and machine learning taking over many aspects of human life in ways that maybe are not desirable, there are also advantages that we have to harness because whether we like it or not, we are living in an age of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So when I talk about, again, this is sort of the shorthand that I use on my own campus about describing the libraries. We were open, interactive, and computational. And let me explain that just a little bit. So open to me is about more than open access, although open science is really a key component. But it's also about being a library that's open and inclusive of a range of ideas and of types of knowledge and ways of knowing. Interactive means that we collaborate with scholars as partners, because in a computational world, librarians' understandings of how information is organized, the way librarians have always understood how data is managed and where and how bias can creep in, where and how absences from the data and an incompleteness actually can affect things. That is something that librarians have always understood and always been experts at. That becomes so much more important when we're doing work like that at scale and when our collections are being consumed at scale. The things we understand about how collections are developed and organized and curated becomes even more important to share with our researchers, and we become sort of important partners, I think, and collaborators in the research. And then computational, when I talk about a library that's computational, I really am talking about ensuring that our collections are accessible in formats that are optimized for text mining and for other kinds of computational analysis, and that we design a technical infrastructure and a service layer so that patrons can design and code their own ways to access and analyze our collections. So that we're not just providing one interface that dictates how people will interact with our collections, but we're providing a little bit more freedom and allowing those patrons who have the skill set and the desire to access it through computer code and do their own things with our collections can do it. So it's this computational part that I think is really interesting. And it's where libraries can play a unique and important role. Oh, that's not flat. In this age of artificial intelligence. And there are a couple of different ways that I like to group this and think about it. So the first is, I mean, we all know that there are many problems with biased algorithms, and bias especially in terms of the data that the algorithms are being trained on and being used on. So when the data that's being used in computational research is not diverse, when it's not inclusive, when it's incomplete, or when it's described in ways that reflect societal biases and prejudices and inequalities, then those problems and biases get reflected and in fact amplified in the findings and conclusions that are made through that kind of research. And again, I think librarians know better than most people how information is collected and assembled and organized, so we know where things can go wrong. And it's really important for people who work in libraries to understand data and metadata the way that we always have. And in that way, we continue to be important, and perhaps more important, in helping to ensure that scholars are aware of the shortcomings of the data that they use, and we can help to mitigate some of the impacts of those limitations. We can also use machine learning in our own work, in library workflows and so forth. And for me, one of the more interesting ways it's being done at MIT is that the MIT Press is using a machine learning tool developed by a company called Do You Know to essentially read all of the books in their catalog, both their back file and the new books that they are publishing. And this algorithm reads the books and can extract all of the subjects to a degree of precision that humans who are assigning subject headings would sometimes miss. And so it allows them to, one, understand as a press sort of their catalog and what they've published and what subjects to a finer degree of detail, but it also aids in discovery in a way that, so a book about machine learning, actually 17% of the content on that book is about education, and some portion of it is about science. And these are things that a human reader might not have picked up on to that degree. So we can use machine learning in various of our own workflows. We can also do what libraries have always done, and we can provide a central resource, right? So we can be a centralized, accessible, and inclusive resource to our communities. We can provide centralized access to computational tools and resources as a way, I think of it as a way to equalize access to machine learning across our campus, right? And some libraries might do this by providing artificial intelligence labs in the library. So there's a couple of universities in the US that have set up machine learning labs in the library where they provide hardware and software and a little bit of sort of starter training for students who just want to get their hands dirty with a little bit of data and a little bit of machine learning. We can also maintain online libraries of training data and basic algorithms that students can then use and modify so that they can learn. But again, I think I've emphasized that to me, the most important thing that libraries can do is work to ensure that the knowledge and the research products that we already collect and that we curate and that we disseminate, make sure that those are openly available and that the scholarly record that we provide is as diverse and inclusive and well described as possible, so that as people start to exploit that data with machines and with algorithms, that what they're working on is well described and can be as accurate and as impactful as possible. So here's where and why I think it's so important, and where I hope to segue into the next panel really well. So for me, it's this combination of truly open access to lots and lots of content of all kinds, so text and data and computer code and images and maps, right? If that is openly available and analyzed with powerful computational tools and methods, then I think really interesting things can happen. We know that new findings, new understandings, new discoveries in sciences and humanities up to this point have mostly occurred because we build on prior knowledge. We build on what we know and what others have discovered before us, and we make new and creative connections, right? When we have computational access to that prior knowledge, if it's open, right, then that means that those new discoveries can happen at a speed and scale that we can't even imagine yet. Certainly, the choice of topics and problems, the interpretation and application of the results requires human intervention. I hope nobody hears me arguing that we don't need humans anymore, the machines are taking over. Humans are as important, more important in this computational age. But machine learning tools can speed up the process. And when we combine that with open access, then you can equalize the ability, start to equalize the ability of people to make use of prior knowledge and things that we already know and use it more quickly to make more discoveries. So this connection between open science and computational analysis is why this topic's so exciting to me, why I talk about it a lot, why I was so pleased that the Future of Libraries Task Force at MIT thought about the libraries as being a player in that way, and again, not just about books and buildings or digitized collections, right, but being a player and a platform for this kind of research. So that connection between computational research is only effective when you can have access to the data and to collections as data in an open way, is why one of the recommendations from the Future of Libraries Task Force was that MIT convene another task force, but this time on open access and open science. And I'm co-chairing that task force now. We'll issue a report in the fall with some recommendations. But as our task force has engaged with faculty and students across MIT and elsewhere, talking about the cause of open science and why we need the faculty to be enthusiastic and enthusiastic participants in the cause of open science, one of the things that we've emphasized is that open science to research is good for research. It's not just about saving money for the libraries. Although that's important. That's not the only reason, but that open science is good for research. It's critical to enhancing our ability to collectively solve big global challenges. And that seems to be a compelling argument for faculty, and I think it's a true argument. But the argument for open science that has resonated most strongly at MIT is when we explain to scholars that when they lock their work up behind publisher paywalls, that means that their research will likely be left out of the scholarly conversation and the progress of science, because those conversations and that progress is increasingly computational, and researchers who are looking to use machine learning to analyze previous knowledge and are looking to use computational analysis, they want to use data that is easily and openly available. So right now, as the MIT libraries are trying to support our scholars who are doing computational analysis of scholarly literature, there's one faculty member in material science and engineering who wanted to analyze a large corpus of journal articles written in her field she describes it as extracting recipes for materials. So she used natural language processing and machine learning to basically read all of the journal articles in her field. They were able to she trained the algorithm to recognize the sections of the articles that describe the combination of materials that were used to create a new material and extract recipes for materials to then be able to create new materials more quickly. To do that, to provide her the data for that, the MIT libraries worked with her over many, many months to negotiate 10 separate contracts to create the data set. We shouldn't have to do that. So this is why I'm obsessed with the combination of if those materials were openly available in a repository, in a format that was machine accessible, and we have the machine learning tools and the algorithms, then that kind of learning can happen so much faster, and we can make progress so much faster. So computational isn't enough, open isn't enough. It is the combination that, to me, is really, really, really powerful. And I think, again, continuing to push on open access is super important, because right now, some of the commercial publishers are trying to actually commoditize computational access now as well. So they want to sell us not just the rights to read the articles that our faculty have written, but now they want to create a for-cost service around computational access to scholarly content. But to me, it makes more sense for institutions, for universities to maintain control of our own scholarly content. We should be disseminating and preserving it, in my opinion, in institutionally owned and operated repositories. I'm a big fan of the green model of open access. I was pleased to hear that that is a prevailing model in Spain, so even more excited to be able to talk to, so I don't talk to like-minded librarians and researchers. But I think, you know, if we just imagine the progress that could be made as a society, if the output of researchers were openly available and computational available in interoperable repositories across the globe, operated by the academy, right? So to me, it's possible that the most important thing libraries can do in a computational age is to continue to fight for open science and open scholarship, to continue to fight for that, the dissemination of scholarship to be based on academic values served through academy-owned infrastructure. And I say that because I believe that we are motivated by not a profit motive, but by actually the advancement of knowledge. I also say that because I think universities are long-standing, right? We have sort of a longevity that commercial entities don't have. So librarians and libraries and universities are places that think about the past, but also have long futures ahead of them in ways that we can't count on the commercial entities to have. So to me, it is this combination of open and computational and academy-owned. That's the future that I think libraries are uniquely well-suited to pursue. I think it's what our universities and our communities need us to focus on. And I'm just really glad that this event has some sessions that will follow me with experts on open science. I'm excited to learn from others who are going to speak here today and hear what they have to say. Because I think, again, as I said at the beginning, none of us can do this alone. We have to do this in collaboration, and it should be a global collaboration because knowledge is global, and the right to access information and knowledge is a global human right. At least that's what the United Nations has said, and I agree. So I thank you so much for letting me share sort of these thoughts with you today. I'm happy to take questions. I think is that I have to say I'm happy to take questions, but I'm just as happy to hear your comments and thoughts, even if there's not a question, because I don't pretend that I have all the answers. I think that together we have a lot of knowledge in this room, so I'd love to hear your comments as well as your questions. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
So, tenemos entonces un breve turno de preguntas. Si hay alguien que quiera dirigir alguna pregunta a Chris, por favor. Sí, tenemos una pregunta, Patricia.
Oh, okay.
Buenos días, muchas gracias por su muy interesante presentación. Mi pregunta sería si en este modelo el acceso abierto, the open access to information, is based on the information provided by the publishers of just created inside the academy. which could be do you think is a new model of publishing inside the academy, not mediated by the publishers?
So I think the question was, do I envision a new model of publishing from the academy that takes the publishers out of the picture? Is that sort of what you... I do think, I mean, for me, part of my job at MIT is I also have oversight of the MIT Press. And so for me, whether it is libraries that do their own publishing through the repository, or through nonprofit and university-based publishers like the MIT Press, I do think, I was about to say, don't tweet this, but we're recording it anyway, so my preference, and I speak now as an individual with some experience and opinions, I'm not speaking for my institution, but my preferred future for scholarship is entirely academy-owned. I think that knowledge should not be commoditized and commercialized. I think, that said, I think there are services that, that some commercial entities provide that we should be willing to pay a fair price for. But I think the content, the knowledge that we produce in the academy, we should own the means of disseminating that. Does that?
En relación a la ciencia abierta y a la nueva tendencia del depósito de los datos de investigación, ¿cuál ha sido la respuesta de los investigadores del MIT? ¿Están trabajando activamente en depositar esos datos de investigación en su repositorio?
Yes, please translate. Thank you.
Open science and the deposit of the information in the repositories. Are you also depositing the data, the research data?
So I think the question was, in addition to the articles, are we also working on data and deposit of data? Of data sets, yes. So I think that that's a really important question, right? Are we also collecting data? And in the Open Access Task Force at MIT, we talked a lot about data and whether or not, right now MIT has a policy that all faculty, we have the right to openly disseminate journal articles, but we don't have a policy about data. And our task force debated whether or not we should also require data deposit. And that was the issue that we got the most pushback on, resistance from faculty because of the differences across disciplines in the kinds of data that's produced, right? And so what we ended up recommending around data was that each department developed their own plans and policies around data that would honor the kinds of data that's produced, so that the kinds of data that's produced by an anthropologist or a sociologist, that might be ethnographic data, more qualitative data, has very different requirements and different ability to share and still honor privacy and sensitivity than data that is purely numeric and maybe chemical data and abstract data. So we didn't feel like a one-size-fits-all data requirement would work. But what we recommended is that the departments sort of think that through and develop plans themselves. We also, I'm also working with a group that, run by the National Academies of Science in the US that's trying to get departments across different schools to work together and collaborate on those kinds of open data plans, because one of the things that we learn is that, of course, the incentives for a scholar to share openly, even their articles, the incentives are messed up because are misaligned. because they have an incentive to publish in the highest prestige journal so that they can get tenure. So the incentives are misaligned. And then with data, the incentives are also misaligned because we hear from scholars that they have to hold on to their own data so that they can get as many publications out of it as they possibly can before they let anyone else use this data that they collected themselves. So those incentives are misaligned. And there's also the challenge that if one school in the US says, okay, but too bad, you'll share your data, we would be disadvantaging our own scholars as they want to move from institution to institution. We'd be disadvantaging our graduate students. So we have to, again, goes back to what I said, have to work together. So this National Academies work, project that I'm working on is asking departments in a single field across the US. So we have, I think, 5 different top sociology departments, for example, where the department chairs are going to work together to come up with a similar plan for encouraging open sharing of data and articles. So I think the real answer to your question is data's really hard. That was a long way of saying that. Oh, okay. Thank you.
No sé si tenemos más preguntas. ¿No hay más preguntas? Sí, tenemos una última pregunta.
Hola, buenos días. Yo pertenezco a la Universidad Rey Juan Carlos del campus de Móstoles, que es donde están los ingenieros y matemáticos, biólogos e informáticos. El caso es que hace unos días un profesor del área de biología y geología, un gran investigador de nuestra universidad, me propuso que hiciéramos unos expositores en biblioteca sobre la metodología en la enseñanza por parte de los profesores, porque en realidad nadie les enseña cómo ejercerla, ¿no? Y entonces él le gustaría proponer varias formas, porque sí, hemos estado hablando aquí de los algoritmos, de la inteligencia artificial, de cómo desde cada departamento poder buscar fuentes de aprendizaje, pero también la parte humana, que es los propios profesores junto con las bibliotecas, cómo colaborar desde la parte humana, ¿no? Para que eso pueda ser posible. Habría que buscar también una forma, unas metodologías para el aprendizaje hacia los alumnos. Eso, muchas gracias.
No, I think that's exactly right. I don't want to imply that I think the human element is not critically important. It's probably even more important, and for some of the reasons I talked about, but also, as you say, that we have not yet, over the years, perfected the way in which we convey knowledge and teach and learning, and we're still understanding that more and more. And ironically, I find in the US at least, it's ironic that many college professors don't incorporate what we know about learning into their own teaching habits, and we need to do that better. So I think there is this very human element in teaching, and the libraries have a really important role to play in that. And I think it has to do with across all subjects, but right now my obsession is with helping students at MIT understand and learn about the social and ethical implications of technology. And I think one of the things that I like about the way teaching happens at MIT is, again, there's very few lectures at MIT. It's very hands-on, and they learn by doing things. But that part about learning sort of ethical and social implications remains really important.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Muchas gracias.